Greetings, growers around the world. Jordan River here, back with more Growcast. Sinfully good. Today we head to Sin City. We are talking about Las Vegas and the cannabis scene there for Worldwide December. Almost through and into January, which we're going to be doing some deep dives, everyone. Going in depth into cultivation science. But for now, we continue Worldwide December with our guest today, Tony G, first-time guest. You are going to love this episode. Before we get into it, though, shout out to Rimrock Analytical, rimrockanalytical.com. Code GROWCAST for free shipping on your order. Code BULK10 for when you buy 10 or more sex tests. That's right, the sex testing is my favorite part of Rimrock Analytical. You do not have to wait to cull your mails or mess with flipping any clones or waiting any longer than it takes to mail a little sample. Rimrock Analytical is fast and it's accurate. It's a small company. It's great to support small businesses like theirs. Always use code GROWCAST, and members of the Order of Cultivation, our membership program, get an extra 10% off on top of everything. That's right. RimrockAnalytical.com. Stop wasting time sex testing your plants. Find all the females with a simple mail-in test and use code GROWCAST always, folks. All right, that's all, everybody. Let's get into it with Tony. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, as always, I urge you to share the show, tell someone about Growcast, turn someone on to growing. It's the best thing you can do. And see everything we are doing at growcastpodcast.com/action. You'll see the classes and the membership and the seeds and all the fun stuff that we're doing. Come and see us, everybody. We are wrapping up Worldwide December. I really do love this month. After, in-depth education all year round. And we still do grow education on this month, but I get a lot of compliments on these episodes where we just kind of check out the state of the cannabis industry and the history of the cannabis industry in these different locales. So I'm super excited to get into it today with actually a Growcast team member. He is a grower. He's a home grower advocate. He was working for us at one point, making some really awesome resources back in the Grow Pass days. And I'm really excited. We just caught up when I was in Vegas. And so that's where we're headed today, Nevada, straight to the city of Sin. And on the line we have Tony G. What's up, Tony G? How you doing, man?
Hey, Jordan. Good to hear from you, man.
Yeah, good to talk to you, brother. It was cool catching up when I was just in Vegas for BizCon. We got together. We got to talk about home growing. And you always impress me with your passion for activism and your love of the plant, man. So I just got to give you props. It was cool catching up.
Thank you. Likewise. It was absolutely, the pleasure was all mine, man. It was a blast to see you. It was cool to see a friendly face and to really get down on some cannabis conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get into it all today. I want to talk about Vegas. It's a wild cannabis market. It's like super unique. There's a lot to dive into. So let's start at the beginning, though. Can you talk about your background? What brought you to growing? What brought you to the industry and eventually like working in the white market? Just tell your story for the listeners, if you could, please.
Absolutely, man. It's an interesting, long story.
Right.
It starts actually that I was born and raised in the Emerald Triangle. I'm from a little tiny town called Leggett, which is about 300 people tucked in the northern part of Mendocino County, which is
right off the 101.
Yeah, it's right where the 101 meets the 1 as it comes off the coast there.
Yeah.
I actually used to work at the drive-through tree right there.
It's beautiful. That is like the most beautiful drive. You can choose the 101 or the 1, and either way you're in for the most beautiful drive in the world. Sorry though, continue.
No, I love driving because of those roads. And I miss driving in the rain and I miss seeing the trees. That is one of the things I really miss being in Nevada is the forest and the trees and the rain.
Right.
But yeah, so that's where I was born in literally on in the town of Fort Bragg on the coast. I was raised in Leggett. I went to high school in Laytonville, which is the next town south, a little bit bigger. But the area is just teeming with cannabis. The most interesting thing to me is the kind of green rush that came before cannabis. And that was actually the reason for my family being up there. My dad was a logger. My grandfather was a logger too. And they came up from Long Beach.
Right.
And they were, there was a big rush of green up there for logging. And that there was a huge logging industry because of all the redwoods. And there's not just redwoods up there too. There's just, acres and acres and millions of acres up there of just rolling hills or mountains of forest. So there was a big bunch of people who came up there. My family was among those folks, and but that logging industry eventually fell out. It was a boom for a while, and it was very supportive of a lot of families up there, but then it just dried up and went away.
Sure.
And so a lot of those people actually befriended a lot of the hippies who had moved up there in the 60s and 70s with, Wavy Gravy and all the Grateful Dead folks.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge deposit of them up there. They just kind of wanted to get away from everything. And so they kind of, the hippies and the loggers got together and they started growing weed. They took their different skills and they kind of combined them. And that's kind of where the cannabis industry, or at least the Emerald Triangle cannabis industry was kind of born.
That's a really interesting way to look at that intersection of the two occupations and the two cultures, right? My experience living in Humboldt,
absolutely,
it was exactly that. They weren't the same West Coasty. They have a different feel. They're more woodsy and they're more blue collar, and they got more guns than a lot of the people up on the, they're just, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to make a political comment one way or the other, but I'm saying the difference between the people that I met in Humboldt and some of the other people on the West Coast was pretty distinguished. And when you talk about those two industries kind of intersecting, that could really have played into it. The logging industry, really, really good point.
Yeah. And you make a good point as well, that the kind of caliber of folks out there just a little different. And I don't mean to disparage anyone else from anywhere at all.
Exactly.
I'm just saying, we consider ourselves mountain folk, and we're pretty hard, like this. It's rough up there sometimes. There's mountain lions, and there's wild Russian boars. There's bears. There's stuff up there to contend with when you're out in the woods growing weed. I remember one time, biggest black bear I have ever seen in my life came rolling through our patch in the middle of the night. We had seen him roll. He literally was so big and fat he could just roll over the fence. He would just push up against it and just kind of and then just the fence would fall over because he was huge.
Oh my God.
And one night I heard something outside and I poke my head outside and I get the flashlight and there's just this, giant black bear digging through my trash. And I didn't have any, I had a gun, but it was up at the patch. And for this specific, situation, and I'm not going to, I don't like to, I grew up as a hunter, but I don't shoot things just because, in that situation, we'd be firing a shot off into the woods and hoping the noise would scare them. But the animals up there were crazy, and they were pretty gentle. I'm not saying that they were aggressive, but there's just plenty of them up there in the deep woods.
You got to worry about that sort of thing, man. Sometimes black bears get hungry. Sometimes you're, standing between the cubs or whatever. Like, that's crazy stuff. It's a different type of IPM you got to worry about.
That's definitely pest management that is on a different scale.
Yeah.
And they love fish emulsion. They will go digging out. They will dig out your pots to try to find the fish they think are in there. If you use a lot of fish emulsion, it's funny, weird little things like that,
Wow. So Humboldt roots.
Definitely.
And is that where you cut your teeth growing and everything was there? So I didn't realize there was such a gap between that and when you ended up moving east towards Nevada.
Yeah. So that okay, we'll go a little deeper. I'll give you quickly a little background. I grew up in a pretty religious household. My parents were split. My mother was religious and my father was not. He was the logger and later pot grower. He also ran cattle. He was an entrepreneur, he liked to call himself. But he was kind of known for being a little crazy. But my first experience was actually at 17 because my father, he passed away when I was 17. From colon cancer, and that's why he started growing pot later, was because he needed to pay for his medical bills, which is a whole nother thing we can get into. So my first real experience was at 17, because previous to that, out of courtesy, my dad really didn't get me involved in anything in his growing stuff, out of courtesy to the religion and my mom and that kind of stuff. But then when my dad passed away, the rest of my family, I have 4 siblings, we kind of quickly had to figure out how to shut down his situation. He had a partner and we were working with his partner, but we had a legal scare. We basically had to cut a bunch of plants down in the middle of the night. And so me and my dad's partner and one of my sisters that will remain nameless, we piled into a truck in the middle of the night and we went up the hill and we cut a bunch of plants down. And, my sister was in the truck keeping an eye out. And me and my dad's partner were cutting plants down. And I didn't really, being raised religious, I, didn't really mess with it that much.
Sure. You didn't
I
quite
was
understand what you were doing. They were just saying, hey, these are plants, cut them down.
exactly. And what I had an understanding that there was, that it was cannabis. I had been, over to my cousin's house when I was like, 8, 10 years old and being like, what's all this green stuff drying on the ceiling? You're like, don't worry about it. But that's just part of the culture up there. It's just everywhere. Yeah. And it's not, and I don't want to think that, I don't want to say that anyone's endangering kids at all. We happened into a place that we weren't supposed to be. So
sure.
I will say that
I totally
one of my favorite things about kind of the mindset of the folks up there is that they're very careful about children and waiting until someone's an appropriate age to handle, seeing things, understanding the concept of it, and consuming it. So
Right. Well, I mean, think about what we do with like something that's not medicinal, like alcohol, versus just having it be kind of part of your culture growing up, like they do in places in Humboldt or even like places like Jamaica. And there's
absolutely.
no like detriment. So sorry, but you can continue.
Oh, no, not at all. But yeah, so at 17, me and my dad's partner were cutting down plants, and I was getting a little high from the oils on because there was just my hands were so sticky. I couldn't touch it. I was just sticking to all the bags, and the part of the season we were in, it was the resins were so fresh. And these were like 8, 10 foot tall plants sitting in 3 foot tall pots. So they were big mamas. And so we were stuffing them into garbage bags. And then, I got super paranoid. I actually later on, I remembered it differently because I was so anxious. I had like imagined at some point that there was like some helicopter that we thought we heard, but I think that was just a paranoid imagining. But that's, everything was fine. We got it to my dad's partner's place, and that was fine. That was just the experience of that was intense, but like kind of formative. I was like, man, this is a really important plant. People are willing to go through great lengths to grow it and to provide it to other people. And it's helped. I had seen little odds and pieces of it in the culture growing up. It's everywhere. That like with so many people who have it, there's definitely a lot of kids when you're growing up in school who have it. There's a little more exposure to other drugs. Unfortunately, I would say, like growing up in the schools, I was exposed to some other drugs that weren't cannabis a little earlier. I think just because of the unfortunate relationship with the black market and how there's I don't have any money to pay you. Here, take some of this other stuff I have instead.
Good old public school too, am I right? The ultimate fucking...
Oh, yeah.
It's bad. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Depends on where you live.
Absolutely.
But for me, and I didn't even go to a bad public school. I went to a nice public school.
And mine was really tiny. My graduating class was 31. It was in Laytonville. And I will say a lot of the funding that school got was from pot growers, people who had families and they had trying to support families up there on the hill, and they would, they knew their kids needed computers, or they knew they needed a new facility for something. We had in high school, we had a mushroom grow house. Like, it was a hay bale grow house built for growing mushrooms. And that was all by donation of, super generous parents who were pot growers. Yeah. And there's education funds up there that are all like, everyone had set aside £1. There's just really, really amazing, generous community-based stuff up there, all trying to just keep that community going. And I know things have gotten much harder up there since legalization, for a million different reasons that we don't have to get into.
But that's the juxtaposition, though. I'm starting to understand why you have the view that you have, which is I didn't realize that you grew up so closely integrated into what is, the epicenter of the cannabis community, essentially, in this country, if not the world. So that's really crazy to see how you grew up with that, and now you've seen regulation replace criminalization. Yes. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people are left standing around going, holy shit, this is way worse than it was before. And in a lot of ways, it's way better.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, no, there's definitely some improvements. I will say, just like any process that gets better as it is built, there's going to be improvements. There's going to be understandings that you gain. There's going to be, jumps in ability and understanding. And it's, I think it's all going in the right direction, but, markets having to settle and us having to educate ourselves on all what's going on is a rough process.
Yes, absolutely. And it's critical.
And I will say, I think that people are taking advantage of that kind of gap in the information, and like, oh, well, like people don't know the difference. So let's just try to do what everything, to every other commodity, what it gets done, or people
Yes.
try to do that to cannabis.
Try to stuff it into a different commodities business model. That's
Yes,
very true.
absolutely.
But that's where Vegas, I think, really has a weird vibe to it. Like that had to have been a big shock going from, like I said, how do I put this? I don't want to say like the harmonious, but a black market that was like balanced and part of the community and not perfect in any way, but still like, kind of grassroots oriented, now to some of the weirdest white market structures I've ever seen personally. When did you end up in Vegas, and did you jump right into the white market cannabis scene? What was that like?
Well, I actually ended up in Reno first, in northern Nevada, which I'm really glad for. Otherwise, I might have really disliked Nevada on the whole. Well, let me get to that. I came into northern Nevada and the Reno area. I actually moved into a tiny town called Urington. I have a thing for tiny towns. And then I moved to Reno. I actually was able to move to Reno because I got a job at a dispensary. And I've been in Vegas for about a year, a little over a year, but I've been in Nevada cannabis for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, so you moved to Reno, you jumped right in with a job at a dispensary.
Yeah. I jumped right into a job at a dispensary as a bud tender, and back when it was medical only. I started working at the first dispensary in Nevada called Silver State Relief. They were like the first one to break ground and actually have a retail store. There's some debate about that, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was. I've seen the news report. But that was a whole different side. And I will say that there was a parallel for me in seeing how the small medical market, when recreational came along, everything changed, and not for the better. And I will say that there's some parallels to that, and how that has happened in other places.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually super curious to hear your opinion too, because I think I have that saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, or
yes.
whatever. I'm in the middle of a very different, unique kind of cannabis market, and I'm very curious to know what's going on in the other markets.
Well, you just nailed it. You basically echo the sentiment of a lot of states, which is recreational markets come in and ruin everything. If you look at the medical program in California, pre and post Prop 64 or whatever that proposition was, a lot of people say that ruined the market, right? And it's still dangerous to grow your own medicine in a lot of ways. But I've never seen laws like this before. In fact, they're so ambiguous that it's not even easy to find the exact articles of these things. Like usually when you Google a state law, you'll get like summaries of the law, right? Like the first thing that pops up on Google, or like Normal, on Normal, they'll have a summary of the law. And then under that, you'll get the long, boring link to the thing, right? That you can look up and copy and paste exactly what they say. We just did this with Illinois on a different stream. But for Nevada, it's like really hard to find the normal summary is even like nebulous and ambiguous. It's really, really nuts. But tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong at all. And there is some reason for that. I will say it's been conflated to an insane degree. So when you're talking about laws and regulations in Nevada, there's 4 different sets of laws. There's an administrative code, there's a licensing and control, there's a medical use, and an adult use. So those are all different statutes in the Nevada cannabis law. There's also 16 regulations, which are addendums to those laws. And each of those laws has each one of those individual things are written in just straight legal code. It's hard for the layperson, the average person, to be able to even differentiate like the first half of the entire document and almost them are just defining terms. Things like cannabis product, cannabis production facility, cannabis sales facility.
I'm looking at that right now. You're right. All these definitions, general provisions, definitions, like pages and pages of what is THC defined, state prosecution defined, production defined, paraphernalia defined.
Yeah. And so it's unwieldy to try to know the laws. I am a nerd, and I've read all the laws, and I've read them multiple times. But I was also an operations manager and a general manager for a dispensary. So I I wanted to understand and know. And I don't think I have it's not like, oh, I've read them, I know them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm familiar with them and I can reference things pretty well. It is very hard to navigate.
It is.
I
had
to in order to find the grow law that I was looking for, and I was working for a company at the time. I actually reached out to our operations manager for the whole company and asked them if they could find this piece of code or this part of the administrative law that I was looking for. They ended up finding it. We can talk about that law later. I think you found part of it, but it's very hard to navigate. And I will say, to go back to your question originally, it is for a reason. So that is why Nevada was a little bit ahead of the curve as compared to other places, is because there is some precedent for regulation of things that are normally not regulated in other areas, like prostitution and gambling.
Right.
So
didn't think about it like that.
That gave the voters, I think, the confidence to vote this law in, because they thought that and the only way this law was going to be allowed was if it was regulated to an almost insane degree. So when medical came in, it was similar, but when rec came in, it was even more so. So the laws are super specific on purpose, a little hard to navigate, but there is some advantages, and stuff like testing for terpenes. Every single batch of every single product that you can find in a legal cannabis store has the terpenes on it. The top 3 terpenes. You can request like a full COA. You can get the full, every single terpene, every single contaminant. They also, every single batch has to be tested for contaminants, heavy metals, a whole list of stuff.
So the testing is surprisingly, like, other states won't give you a terpene breakdown or require to give you a terpene breakdown, which affects the markets in various ways. But I do think that it pushes forward like proper education of patients, and also allows patients to find what the medicine that works for them. I think it makes the whole system more efficacious if you put terpenes on the front of those packages.
I do too. It changes the shopping conversation. It changes the medical conversation too, because you can, especially when you get, I will say that is one place I think Nevada is very ahead of the curve, is with the understanding of terpenes and how that has an effect on the cannabis experience.
That's crazy.
That is a big part of the conversation. It's actually what I would call a qualifying part of the conversation. When you go into a good shop, if I'm a cannabis nerd, I wear that on my sleeve. So when I start asking about terpenes and stuff, if the bud tender or the whatever they want to call them in their particular store is comfortable having a conversation about terpenes and that kind of stuff, I feel like I can go into a deeper level of conversation with them about cannabis. If they're just like, oh, it's heady, it's this, it's that, and they don't want to talk specifics, then I feel like it changes the conversation a little bit. And I feel like I have to, I rely less on the person that I'm buying from and their expertise if I don't feel like the conversation
you gotta meet them where they're at.
Is up to par.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing in cannabis, man. I think what are they called? Qualifying markers? I think cannabis is full of that. There's a name for that, where the terminology, the knowledge of the language and understanding and use of it is kind of a pass. It's something that allows other people to see, other cannabis fanatics to see that you are also that passionate about it, and you care so much that you're willing to speak a different language in a sense. Any passion has its own set of language, I'm sure.
That's a good way of putting it. And you're right. That is forever developing. That language, that dictionary is expanding as we learn more and more and more, right? Even our testing is so incomplete when it comes to all the different compounds that are in that trichome head that we're still discovering. I mean, we're still discovering, cannabinoids and saying, oh, THC 0 and all this stuff that we never talked about before.
Exactly. I read an article about that not too long ago.
Yeah. And it's and that's now the talk of the town. So I think the lesson to take away from that is there's a lot more discovery to go into it, which is why we need to protect home grow and protect the natural expression of this plant, not diluting it down into some pill or some only commercially available pharmaceutical product.
No, so, I'm super passionate about that.
So you're on that, you're on the surprisingly advanced side of the testing there, but let's talk about the grow laws. These are some of the really strange ones. We'll be right back to the interview, but before that, the Foop, baby. Shout out to the Foop. Go to thefoop.com, just like it sounds. And you can check out all of their amazing products, from the mist to the clone gel to their amazing organic nutrients, certified organic nutrients. This is what I used on my last run. Absolutely loved how the flavor and aroma came out. The trichome density. Foop is where it's at. Plus, they've got a new product. That's right, the Bloom Pack. You guys know the Veg Pack. Well, they've also got the Bloom Pack now. What does it include? It comes with 1 bottle of Bloom 1, a bottle of Bloom 2, and a bottle of the sweetener. Everything your plants need to flourish while flowering. No additives you need in there. It's got everything. It's got silica. It's got humic acids. It's got all the macro and micronutrients. It's got mycorrhiza. It's got all sorts of biology in there for you. Foop is certified organic by Omri and now also the CDFA. Fully organic, works great in all media, feeds your biology, and you're going to want to check out the Foop. The Bloom Pack is really, really nice if you're a soil grower. You know, maybe you're in that pot of soil and you're running out of some of the food that you need to get you through the flower cycle, and you don't want to add anything too salty or anything that's going to kill your biology. Well, use Foop. You can use Foop right on top of that. The plants are going to love it. The worms are going to love it. You're going to love it. It's available in 1-gallon sizes on Foop's website, also in a quart size at Amazon. You can find Foop on Amazon by going to amazon.com/Foop. That brings you right there. Or even better, just get it at thefoop.com. And always use code GROWCAST at thefoop.com for 15% off. So that's a better price there, especially when you use code GROWCAST at thefoop.com. Be healthy, go organic, use Foop, grab a Bloom Pack today, get your flowers smelling right with that amazing fish poop power. Thefoop.com, code GROWCAST. All right, without further ado, let's get back to the interview. Let's talk about the grow laws. These are some of the really strange ones. So you've got recreational grow laws and you've got medical grow laws. Now, the medical grow, you're allowed 12 plants, right? 12 plants is not bad. 12 per person. I mean, obviously, I want no plant counts. Let's be honest. Yeah. But if you have to give me a number and you have to say, like, okay, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's just a regular Joe that's going to be voting on this bill. 12 plants is a good number.
It's solid. Yeah, it gives you the ability to have a variety and also keep yourself self-sustainable, I would say.
But however, there's weird restrictions on it. Before we get into the restrictions, recreational, you're allowed to have 6 plants, but the restriction on that is you can't live within 25 miles of an operating dispensary. Is that right?
Yes, and that was actually the law I referenced earlier that I had to have someone look up. And I was looking for it really hard before I jumped on here. I couldn't find it. I will find it and send it to you. But there is a specific caveat in that law. There's actually 2. So if you are not within 25, or if you're within 25 miles of dispensary, which basically outlaws anyone who lives in a metropolitan area from growing cannabis.
Right.
Like, let's be real. If you live in Vegas, you cannot grow weed if you are to go by that part of the law. And that's the way they want it advertised. And I'm going to be straight about that. This law was hard for me to find. I've never heard anyone talk about it. It's not the way the conversation happens at all. So the other part of the law, the caveat that no one knows about, is that if they can't provide you the strain or the quantity that you require as a and I think this is medical only, to be fair. I don't think this is for recreational.
Right. That's what it says on normal.
Yeah. So if you're medical and they can't provide the strain, there's no testing for strains.
Yeah.
So
right.
Like they can't, if someone were to come in and be like, oh, you can't grow that, I'll be like, okay, then prove it's not whatever. Prove it's not dripping poison. They can't.
So if the dispensary doesn't offer the strain, you can grow these said strains within the 25-mile limit if you have a medical card, but it's totally unenforceable because no one would ever know. And even if you could know, it would still be different in your setup than the same exact testable genotype in somebody else's setup, because the expressions are so different phenotypically, like the environment impacts the phenotype, right? So even 100%. That doesn't make sense. That's crazy.
No, it's all inherently, like, even the law doesn't make sense within itself, for them to say, oh, well, you can't have a strain. And they're like, well, you guys test for these terpenes, and that demonstrates that they're like distinguishably different from each other, even the same strain.
Yes.
And the thing is, it's just that, oh, I need a certain strain that they can't provide me, but you could call it I want purple monkey mango, pineapple. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just a name.
Yep.
The other thing is if you're a medical patient, the caveat that I really like is if they can't provide you with enough quantity. So there's a purchase limit of 1 ounce per day, and you have a purchase or a possession limit. This is where it gets interesting. So when they changed it to recreational, they put the purchase the obligation of quantity, let's say, back on the consumer. So before, when it was medical, it was it was a 2.5 ounce limit for a medical patient, and that was all tracked by a state system, which was an absolute nightmare. So you had, like, literally after every transaction, I'd have to go into a state website, take their patient ID number, look up their information, and post that they had bought so many grams and so many milligrams.
Yeah, it was like that in Illinois for a minute. So stupid.
Yeah.
And you run into your limit, and then you just have to like request more, and they're like, "All right, we've submitted your request."
Oh, you can't in Nevada. Once you hit your limit, you were done.
Really? That's terrible.
Oh yeah, there was like you might be able, but it was a daily limit.
Oh, a daily limit. Illinois was
like,
monthly.
oh wait, no, what? I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was a 2-week limit, so it would reset after every 2 weeks.
That's so strange.
Yeah, and it was insane. And so before, it was on the responsibility of the dispensary not to oversell to you. But when they took that reporting situation away, where you had to go report the grams and milligrams, then they put the burden of proving that on the patient. So now it's an ounce limit per purchase, pretty much in all dispensaries. This is the thing is, like, the laws are written a certain way, and then they're interpreted like kind of like as they get used.
Right.
So like that is one thing that is different about here too, is that there are agents. Like, so the CCB is the governing regulatory system that regulates cannabis in Nevada, and that's the Cannabis Compliance Board. They have agents. They come do inspections on everything, from grow to production to retail. And that's the other part of the regulation I was talking about. This is what made people comfortable with passing these laws, is that there was going to be a regulatory committee. It used to be the Department of Taxation. They used to have agents that would come out and do inspections on every kind of facility. And they would shut people down if they weren't up to par. And in some cases, it was good, man. There was, we'll get into another part later. I have a note on it, but there was some pretty scandalous stuff that people have tried
I want to get into that
get away
next.
with that have gotten caught. But
oh man, but there are agents running around. What is this? This is insane. This is like 007 Vegas cannabis agent shutting down black market. This is nuts. They'll shut down white market, like if it's not up to code. If you don't, sure,
if all your vents aren't clean and and that's what I did. I was an operations person, so a lot of my focus was making sure that we were going to pass all inspections. And so I will say that's a very, very, I think that's something that's awesome. I know of stories. I mean, I come from California. I lived there for most of my life. I know stories of places where they just, they get shut down by the cops and they pop up across the street.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
the cops don't have the time, the resources, the money, the hour, all that. They don't have so they just don't bother. So bad stuff keeps happening. People get bad products and they get, stuff that's not tested or whatever. But so there's some good aspects of the Nevada cannabis market. Absolutely. But like, the laws are really hard to interpret. And I would say that it's never been done in court, because no one's ever really been brought to court for this. And that's kind of where a law gets proven, I would say, is that, if there's a precedent set, there's been no precedent set, and no one's really like messed with like trying to say, oh, well, I live in 25 miles of a dispensary, but I'm going to continue to grow, and I'm going to fight back against that. I just think I think the laws have discouraged people from growing so much to make it so that people will just go to the markets and buy the stuff that's there.
Sure.
I think that's the point of those laws, is to be confusing on purpose, to make it a terrifying, you're going to get raided and, get a knee in the back of your neck if you're going to grow incorrectly, because the laws are so confusing. If you don't interpret them correctly, that's what's going to, I think they're writing on that, and they want it. And I know I say they, a very informal thing, but I think the people who want cannabis to work the way it's working have done a very good job of making it confusing and scary to grow in Nevada.
And, let's be honest, like you said, if you take a look at the other industries that they operate, they want to lock that shit down too. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the mafioso approach, which is like, you know what I mean? Don't run an operation in conflict with ours. Like, maybe you can do a little thing here or there, but like, don't, like you said, we have laws that are vague enough to come down on you anytime we want. And that city makes a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I think that cannabis has changed that city, certainly since I've been going, as recreational came online, where it was really an alcohol-based city for a long time. And it feels like, to me, year after year, I even talked to a cabbie who said this back before, Uber and things. Maybe it was an Uber driver. And they were talking about, there's more and more weed consumption, less people throwing up in my car, less people getting into fights. You don't see as many of those huge jumbo margaritas. I mean, the drinking culture is still there, But it's interesting how they kind of succeeded making it like it's a thing you come here, you buy. It's a tourist attraction now, and it's kind of changed the culture of the strip a little bit, in my opinion.
I agree. I honestly think they haven't done enough utilization of that. I think that this place could totally be
for sure.
a mecca for that kind. Come to Sin City and have some fun. But I think they have done that, and I think they've done that pretty well. But I think that they could do it so much.
Yeah, what if they leaned into it? Come,
better.
They're trying to do more family friendly thing. It's like you could totally lean into that. Like, come have fun safely. That's the idea. You know what I mean? No sick hangover barfing the next day.
But there's parts about the laws that are hard that make that challenging too. Like, you can't consume. I mean, okay, this gets weird because you can vape in weird places that you can probably get away with, but like, it's not legal for anyone to smoke.
I didn't know that. I mean,
like in casinos or like
I didn't assume it was legal, but I was vaping my vape pen in a casino just kind of quietly. But I'm sure they saw me. They probably, if I kept doing it, they probably would have fucking. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it's kind of don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. I think if you're doing it to the point of being like if you're at a table blowing smoke, I think it's all based by a case by case basis.
How I win my poker games, gas my enemies, gas my opponents.
Yeah, it's probably an equation where they're just like, okay, if he's still pumping money into the machines and he's not causing that much of a problem, I think it's fine.
Oh, man, it's so nuts. Yeah, it would be really cool if they opened up smoke lounges. That would be huge for Cannabis Vegas tourism.
Well, they just did.
Oh, really?
The lounges are just brand new.
Whoa!
I went to one not too long ago. It's not tied to casinos or anything, but they're tied to like big dispensaries or places like that. So they're places where you can actually consume on site, and
that's the move.
It is, and it was pretty cool, man. Like, I will say, like, I went to an event with a group that I know called Lady Led Collabs. Shout out, they're awesome, and they're a ladies cannabis company. And they hosted this event, and it was cool to be able to hang out in a place and know that like you're in the right spot. Like, there's no towel under the door. Like, there's not. It's like it's rare to completely let that part of your brain relax, and It was nice to do that in a setting where you could be taking dabs and ordering cocktails. And I think the ones that we had were like cannabis cocktails. They were cannabis infused stuff, and it was fun. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, man. The Amsterdam
But it's also
model.
like, yeah. But I think they're going to do it very differently here. I think it's a lot of the responsibility is put back on the consumer. Like, it's on you to get home safely. It's on you to figure out how to do that, and not because it's illegal to drive. And there's so many like weird things. Like, it's not okay to smoke in public. And like, if you come here as a tourist, it's very hard to find a place to smoke because, if you want to go purchase a joint, you can't smoke it openly on the strip. You can't smoke it in your motel room unless you are at a smoke-friendly place. And there are a few of those, but like if you're staying at any major casino, especially any place that has any place that has a casino is federally insured. So they can't, by federal law, allow cannabis consumption because that's against federal laws. So there's all these weird federal laws that are overstepping and making it so that the consumption is always a little bit of a weird thing to do. Like, you technically can't smoke in your car, even though it's private property. But everyone does. It's just one of those things where like, I think it is a little bit like Amsterdam in that like there's not really like a legal precedent for some of these things, but they just kind of are letting them happen and not penalizing people for them.
That is true.
Which is a dangerous place to sit. I feel like that's where us as cannabis consumers have sat for a long time. Like, well, it's not really that illegal, but we'll slap you on the wrist if we feel like it.
I mean, that's what's happening right now in the Netherlands. We have an awesome member of our community who's a Netherlands grower, and like, it's not unicorns and rainbows over there like I thought it was.
No.
It's crazy. They're like,
well,
they have their own troubles.
Sounds to me, I mean, I don't know if it's changed since I've watched some documentaries on it, but it sounded like there's precedent for selling it in the coffee shops, but supplying it and growing it is like
transporting
big penalties.
Yeah, exactly.
Transporting,
and they're trying to shut down the coffee shops. They've tried it a few times and there's a lot of parallels to draw between Amsterdam and Vegas. They're two, I would even say that Amsterdam may be the Vegas of Europe. If I if I want to go out on a limb there. You know what I mean? There are a lot of parallels.
I would probably, to be kind to Europe, I would say that Vegas is the Amsterdam of the United States.
Yeah, good call. Reverse that one.
That might piss off some people in Amsterdam.
That is really funny.
And I'm sorry, I'm a little biased.
I mean, it's definitely unique. Well, let's dig into it then, man. Let's go there.
Okay.
Can we talk about anything that you're willing to be, comfortable talking about on air? I don't want to press Tony here, dear listener, but
no.
I know there's been some scandals out there, right? Like there's been scandals in all of these heavily regulated states. What are some of the ones that have happened in Vegas that you'd be willing to talk about?
Well, they're the ones that I'm super willing to talk about. And there are some that I'm more willing to talk about and some that I will still talk about, but I will dance around a little bit, if we can put it like that. The ones that I'll talk about openly are the ones that are open. You can go on, like I said, the Cannabis Compliance Board. You can go to ccb.nv.gov and you can go to, I'm not sure where it's at, but you on their website, it's pretty easy to navigate. You can find all of their public hearings. Like they release all the notes. So if you want to go look up dirt on any dispensary, you absolutely can go see. Just hit Control F and you can search. You can find. The problem is that most of these companies are listed under their parent companies. So you have to find the doing business as company. And that's usually a quick Google search to be like, okay, who is New Woo, for example, which is a native, dispensary out here. Like, who are they doing business as? Because there's a whole layer of like, and I think they're actually required to do that. I may be speaking incorrectly, but yeah, almost every single kind of company out here has a DBA. But you can go on the CCB's website and look up everything they find is public. So if someone, if they have,
there's a whole section on
agents,
complaints here. Yeah. And
yeah. If you go to, I think it's the public meeting complaints. So yeah. And this is, you can see, if you're on that page, there's agent cards, which is like employees of businesses. So like if you work in any place that actually handles cannabis, like a cultivation facility, a production facility where they make like oils and concentrates, or a retail facility where they handle and sell it, you have to be a badged agent of the state. Like again, you have an agent card, like an MME card that authorizes you to work as a cannabis employee. So like some of these are like agent card disputes. Someone didn't have they were found working on a site where they didn't have an updated agent card. I used to work for, we'll keep that out of it. So,
okay.
No, I scrolled down like not even half a page and I saw 2 companies that I had worked for. So, but yes, no, that's some of the bigger things that have happened is there were some seriously big scandals. At one point, the CCB was hammering people, and they should. And I was happy for them to be doing this because they were finding some egregious stuff. Just bad practices, people using things that weren't allowed in the regulations, or like not having safety protocols, or what, just so many different things that you don't want your cannabis company to be doing when they're growing your cannabis for you and your medicine. One place in particular is the sore thumb that sticks out is one company was using a radiation machine to sanitize their cannabis so it would pass testing.
Right. That like nuclear remediation to kill mold spores.
Yeah. So they're basically, their weed was molded out because it is hard to grow cannabis in Nevada. There's some serious challenges. And they were lazy and didn't want to do IPM protocols. So they would just grow the weed and then they would chop it down and they would bathe it in radiation and it would kill everything. So it would go to the testing labs, and everything gets independently tested. That's the thing, is like, it's not like a testing lab that's from the company that's growing it. It's an independent testing lab, just like most other states, I think. But they weren't testing for radons, so they didn't find it.
Oh my God.
Because they didn't think to test for radons.
Fine.
So this, and the crazy thing is, I read this whole report. The CCB agent, when they got there, they said, we have an anonymous tip that this is happening. And they asked like the person who was the staff responsible for like basically the operational person who was overseeing everything, basically the manager on site. And they asked them, are you doing this? They asked them point blank, and the person point blank said, no, we are not. And then they showed them around the facility a little bit, and they later pulled the tape, because everything is also on tape. Every facility that's authorized to grow, produce concentrates or whatever, or sell marijuana. Everything's on camera all the time. So they pulled the tape. That person, they found the machine. They found the radiation machine. They basically they looked around. Under a bunch of lab coats and blankets, they found this machine that they were trying to hide. And so, yeah, they came down really hard on that company because they also, that person, it got individually fined, I think $80,000, like separate from the company. And they were not allowed to get a card to work, like a cannabis card they weren't allowed to get one of those for 25 years in Nevada, I think. And I think the company lost their license to operate, or it was suspended pending investigation. It was crazy. And the company got, a huge fine. That's the one that sticks out to me, because it's such a terrible thing to do for people are taking this medicine to get better a lot of times. And I will say that, like, working before in medical and now in recreational, there's a lot of medical patients who just can't afford to jump through the hoops to get medical. And so they just shop recreational.
Yeah.
That's a huge percentage of recreational customers. So it speaks to the kind of stuff that is happening here. There's a lot of stuff like that. That is the worst. That's the far end of the bad spectrum.
And I've seen that used in other markets, and I guess I could talk to a guest that could explain to me the ins and outs of it, but it just seems like such a bad idea to radiate this flower just to knock out a little bit of botrytis. Like, that seems like such a, there's so many reasons why that makes no sense to me.
If you're consuming the product, and it's irradiated, some of these people have lung issues and they're smoking irradiated.
There's no way that it's not doing something.
It's got to have some kind of ill effect.
I'll have to look into that more, but that's beyond the pale for me. You know what I mean? I'm for access to medicine and everything, but you just got to get your IPM and your environment dialed in there. You don't need to buy a nuclear radiation machine. You're approaching this problem incorrectly, is what I'd say to this person.
I will say that's. I mean, and I have my own unique work experience. I've worked for quite a few different companies in the 6 years that I've been here. Just for, stuff like COVID, changed everything. I've worked for different places. I've done consulting for a couple different facilities, but the underlying current in Nevada, unfortunately, and the story that's not just my story. And then the circle of cannabis friendly people that I, talk to, there's just a lot of unfortunate stuff that happens. There's a lot of, there's big stuff like the, testing issues, labs being shut down, stuff like that. But there's also this other, yeah, this is what I'm really passionate about, man. Like, and my experience, because like I was saying, I come from the other side. I come from legacy. I come from like old school cannabis.
Right.
I'm a third generation like pot farmer, and I grew up in a place that was just embroiled in cannabis, and like the kind of culture that I'm proud of existing in, and then coming into the legal side of it and just being disappointed time and again, working at different places and just seeing, not just terrible things being done to me, but terrible things being done to every kind of creed, color, race, every kind of person that's, that just because they like cannabis. And it's very heartbreaking. It's very frustrating. And I have a lot of people who have stories about what has gone wrong in the cannabis industry since it has become legal, and since there is a legal precedent for things, and since, sorry, I'm getting a little, a little emotional about it, because there's so much pain that people have gone through.
Yeah.
That mirrors the pain we've already been through when 100%. It was illegal.
It's a reflection of criminalization is this regulation. And that's what I'm worried about from the home grower front, because they're going to, quote, legalize it, across all these states, probably federally, but we need to protect the home growers. And testing is nice, but I'm so much more concerned about the full spectrum aspect of protecting the fact that it comes from a seed and that you can grow it in the ground, and that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing dangerous about that, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And I will, sorry to cut you off, but you hit a real big chord with me, man. Like, I have a serious belief that mass-produced cannabis, and I know a lot of people say this, but mass-produced cannabis is a different beast than the kind of craft quality cannabis you can get.
100%.
And the fact that it alters your consciousness, the fact that it has a unique way of interacting with our brain chemistry, and like we have unique receptors that tie into a molecule that it creates. Like it literally fits like a key in a lock. Like a majority of other drugs do something to elicit a response. Like, so it squeezes a gland and makes it dump all of the dopamine or serotonin. So, like that's
right.
It's in concert with a bunch of other things. It's eliciting a reaction. THC and the other cannabinoids are the reaction. They are the key. Like they are that thing that's unlocking that part of our brain, whatever that is. Again, we're still discovering the science on that, but I will say that after working in, legacy and then coming into legal market, like there's a depressive effect that I see from consuming mass produced marijuana that I've had like myself and my friends and family, that it's just like eating that, orange tomato from like Burger King. There's nothing in it. There's no sustenance. I think
there's a lot of things that could play into that. I totally agree. Even from pesticide use, man, I don't trust this narrative that white market cannabis is cleaner. You know what I mean? Even if there is testing, like I've seen it too many times, them putting something on cannabis in the black market too. When I was younger, I wonder how consuming black market cannabis and pesticides may have contributed to my epilepsy versus when I started growing my own and only smoking stuff that I didn't spray with any harmful like neurological pesticides.
And that's honestly what got me back into growing again, man, for one, your podcast, because you're amazing. And I love it. But also like that, I wanted to A/B test the dispensary stuff with my stuff. Because I'm comfortable growing weed. I know I can grow good weed, or at least I could, I have before. And I know I can at least make a product that is to a standard that I think I could compare against the legal weed. And I will say that it is a very different beast. I was just talking to you about it. I just harvested a couple weeks ago my first run on this deep water culture thing I've been doing, and that's the first run I've done in a few years. And we just like I smoked a joint of it this morning. Like there's a different effect. And I've been A/B testing. I've been smoking some of the dispensary stuff, and trying some of the really good dispensary stuff, and then trying some of my stuff. And there's a difference. Like and I know it's easier for people to say, oh, that's placebo. You want to find that effect. So it's there. But I have a pretty scientific approach on this stuff. I really am critical. I'm a super skeptic of everything until I figure it out and try it. And I've been trying it with other people. And, just like there's a difference in eating the standard American diet, there's calories, but there's nothing in there. It's the same thing, man. It's mass produced. It's a commodity that they've taken every sharp corner off of, and they've figured out how to make the maximize profit. And that's what you're putting, you're shoving pounds of that through your body each day, or you're shoving cubic square inches of smoke in your lungs each day. It has to have an effect.
I totally agree. And I think it's just kind of a law of the universe, right? Like rare things are more valuable. Smaller quantity things are more valuable is like this scalable lesson. And it's the case with coffee.
Take energy out of a system.
Yes.
Like it's simple mathematics. Like you can't keep taking something out of a system until it gets to this point where like, oh, it almost takes nothing to produce this. And it's like, well, you're getting nothing as a result. It might look like it's supposed to. It might look like an avocado, but your body doesn't think it's an avocado.
It's not the same experience. I'll tell you that. It's the same exact thing with coffee.
No.
All the smaller and medium-sized craft farmers were the ones that were.
See, I knew this is why we would get down on this, man, because I knew you really got to talk to about this.
Yeah.
It's just about like, you can't maximize profits and create a good product. I'm sorry. Like you can create a stable product. You can create a product that is repeatable. You can create a consistent product. Absolutely. But to create a quality product that enhances things. And that's the thing. It's not vodka. It's not a pair of pants. It's not a hard drive that works or it doesn't.
Right.
There's so much more than it's not just I'm high or I'm not.
It's nuanced.
Oh my gosh.
Like a lot of other
so much
products,
subtlety
right?
to cannabis.
Yeah. I mean, take a look at, and I don't like comparing it to alcohol again, because it's not medicinal, but take a look at the same level of kind of craft that winemakers bring to their wine. And then take a look at mass produced wine.
I love talking about wine
yeah.
and tea, because the kind of craft like
yes.
that goes into that kind of production, it's small batch. It's okay. Here's the difference, man. I'm glad we got here. You've heard of like the term no love weed.
Yeah.
which is like weed that just doesn't get you. I mean, yeah, I'm stoned. Something's different, but like I'm not any happier. I'm not elevated. I'm not like, I don't want to go write music. I don't want to play video games. I don't want to giggle and laugh with my friends. I don't want to, it's not, there's something different about it because it's altering your mind. That no love product, and whatever it is, if it's coffee, if it's, food, if it's vegetables, if it's meat, if it's, there's all these things that you can do.
Cooked with love, man. That's a thing.
Yeah. It's created with love. It's got to have that human touch, man. And if you take that away, then it no longer becomes something that integrates well with a human.
I love that take, man. That's exactly right. I think that's kind of a nuanced subject that has a lot of facets to it, but we've all experienced it. It's a phenomenon that we've all experienced.
Yeah.
Man, this interview flew by. We got a couple more minutes though.
It did.
What should we wrap up with? You want to talk about, like, just really quickly, maybe we could touch on this, just some strain talk. I love hearing what's popular in the area, what's popular with growers, or since you've seen so many like of the old school Northern Humboldt strains, I'm sure you're used to. Is there any crossover with that in Nevada? What have you been growing? I don't know, just whatever you want to talk about strain wise.
Absolutely, man.
Nevada.
I love strain talk.
Yeah.
The Nevada cannabis market on the retail side is pretty, like, the trends are starting to get national in a way. Like,
that's true.
Especially with brands like GTI or Rise, and like they're doing multiple states and stuff. So there's a little bit of pull from that. Like that's what a lot of people are trying to, find the newest stuff. The whatever is like cookies or
runs, cookies.
Runs is super huge. I also am a little bit out of touch with the market because the more I smoke of this stuff, the more I get frustrated with it, to be honest with you. But I will say I'm a fan of old school stuff. Right now I'm growing some Trainwreck that
oh, nice.
I'm loving, man. It's a pretty good producer. I popped 3 seeds. I got 1 male and I got 2 phenotypes out of the females that I popped. They look vastly different. One produced almost like a third more than the other one. It was almost 6-8 inches higher. The colas were bigger. It's just the look and the way it looked was different too. So that one's been super fun.
Oh man. How would you compare that to some of the old school? I got some great Trainwreck out in Northern California circa like 2012, 2013, maybe.
That was good stuff up there, man. That's when I was working up there.
Did you experience that? And if so, has it changed all these years later?
Yeah, I rarely run into something that makes me really feel reminiscent like that. I can smell the notes. I can see, feel, and taste that it's very similar in effect, but
different.
But different, yeah. I mean, I have some Romulan seeds that I'm gonna pop pretty soon. I think I haven't had that in a long time, so I'm hoping that hits that button.
Probably very different growing in that different environment too. It's going to express totally different.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the other thing. Growing in Vegas is very challenging, and anywhere in Nevada is very challenging. And it's mostly IPM related, well, and not just pests, but like any kind of, fungus molds. The funguses and molds here are aggressive.
Whoa.
As can be there. Well, because
soil pathogens and shit.
Yeah. And my reasoning, I think, I've never heard anyone actually say this, but I really think it's because they're desert varieties. So they're used to this harsh environment that's like where there is no love.
Right.
There's barely any water. There's brutal heat and sun and dryness all day long. So when you give a bug that has evolved to be okay in this environment, a grow environment, that dude takes over.
He's going to fight to the bitter end
and they do.
Yeah.
I've never seen some of the stuff. I mean, and I've worked in a couple grows here too. Like I still love, it's very hard. It's a big, big challenge. If you are not like borderlines, like sterilizing everything, they constantly fight it. They have bleach mats that they have everyone step on because even tracking, a spore in. And there's also like some places are just gross. Like I worked at one place that I will not name, but they failed for 11 lots of flour, which is like 50 pounds. That they couldn't sell, and they had, I can't remember what they are. It's a kind of bacteria that's only found in human poop, and
so fantastic.
Yeah, and so somebody at the facility wasn't washing their hands or something. I don't know. But then there also was suspicion that it was like someone was sabotaging. I mean, there's a lot of goofy stuff like that. I worked at a place where they thought one guy that they hired was a plant from another company because but he was just a crappy worker. He just
a crappy worker? Are you kidding me, Tony?
He was. I didn't even catch that pun, friend. Oh, I walked right into that.
That is so crazy, man. The Vegas market seems nuts. Everyone I've spoken to out there has had some sort of story. And I do want to shout out, when I was out there visiting you last time, I also swung by Floor Cannabis, which was cool because they were a living soil producer. Shout out to Sven and Shantae for taking the time to talk to me out there. But it seems like just a wild place to grow with a lot of I don't know, competition, stiff regulation, you know?
Yeah, the regulations make it a little strange for sure. And there's some things that are a little bit ahead. There's a lot of other stuff that's really far behind. And there's a lot of, I'll say one last thing about the bashing on Nevada. No, and I'm not bashing on all of Nevada. I think that I have a responsibility, and I think we all, as a cannabis community, have a responsibility to hold each other to a higher standard. I think that there's a lot of mistreatment of people who are really passionate about cannabis because people just want to make a quick buck. They just want to get a license and sell some weed or do something. They have some money somewhere else and they're just Johnny come latelys. And it's the same thing that happened up in California and in the Emerald Triangle. A bunch of people got wind that you could go up there and buy some land and grow weed. And then there was, a bunch of Johnny come latelys came roaring up in their big white trucks and kind of blew up the spot. And that's kind of what's happening. Like all of the corporate stuff, there's a lot of corporate mentality, a lot of stuff blowing up our spot and trying to commoditize this precious plant. So it's, that's something I'm super passionate about.
I totally agree, Tony. Now, on that note, to wrap it up, I feel like there's a lot more that I could be doing, but I feel you need to choose your battles.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what's coming, I feel, is inevitable and kind of unstoppable.
Yeah.
So to me, if we could just protect home grow, that's it. If we could just pull back our forces, right? And have a last stand, a battle of Thermopylae, Two Towers style. I think that we do that at home grow. And that way we at least have this kind of option, this second avenue where people can get the medicine if they just learn to grow their own.
100%, man. And I will say, coming from, the land of the rude boys and the gorillas up north, you're not going to take our home grow away. Like, we're going to do it no matter like we've always done it.
That's right.
And we will continue to do it. And you can play with us or you can play against us.
I would love to put that into the minds of the people who are making these laws. Sorry, I'm just closing my Grove bag here.
No worries, man.
I would love to get that in the minds of the people who are making these laws, which is you really don't have much of a choice here. Like, it's going to go back to the way it was unless you let us do our thing.
Well, the reason the way it is because of our persistence in doing that. Like, we wouldn't be where we are now if there wasn't a bunch of people who were growing illegally before it was allowed.
Yep.
There wouldn't be those people advocating and showing, their friends that it was medicine and helping people with their seizures. And, I believe in the medicine of this plant, and that, we could do a whole nother episode on my medical thoughts on this stuff. But
yeah, we'll talk terpenes, get you on Growcast TV, man. There's a lot more that we're going to do for sure. And I want to get you involved I want to get you involved in the Cannabis Home Growers Coalition that we're doing 100%. Okay. So we're going to do a lot of that activism work this coming year. So in fact, this episode is dropping December 19th. We are doing a donation drive giveaway. It's on Instagram if you want to check it out, but just awesome. Really quick.
I will.
If you donate, anyone out there who's listening, to your local toy drive, food bank, donate a coat or anything like that, make sure to take a picture or a video and send it to me, because we're giving out a Growcast Wish and we're giving out a bunch of free membership. So this is exactly what Tony's saying. We got to give back to the community, and we got to give back from an activism perspective to protect home grow. So we're going to talk more, you and me, Tony, off air. And you keep kicking ass out there in Nevada, man. I'm going to come visit again real soon, hopefully. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Anytime, man. It was a pleasure to see you. And it was a pleasure to talk to you on here, man.
Yes.
This has been the blast.
Hell yeah. I know you listeners enjoyed this worldwide December tour, stopping by Sin City. We got one more episode, and then we're diving right back into some serious in-depth education. We're going to go deep, some deep dives in January, everybody. So stay tuned. And thank you, Tony. This was a dope episode, and we'll have you back real soon, all right?
Thank you, Jordan. I really appreciate it, man. I have so much gratitude.
Hell yeah. Right back at you, man. Listeners, take care out there. Follow us at Growcast on Instagram. Get on our mailing list, growcastpodcast.com/list. You know all the stuff. This is Tony G and Jordan River signing off, saying have an extraordinary day, everyone. Be safe and grow smart. That's our show. Thank you so much to first-time guest Tony G. We're excited to see him back again on the show soon. I know you enjoyed that one. Before we wrap it up, make sure to see everything that Growcast is doing at growcastpodcast.com/action. There you'll find our membership, which is where we help growers in their own gardens, give them hundreds of hours of bonus content, discounts on seeds and classes, and all sorts of good stuff. That's all found at growcastpodcast.com/membership. Or go right to growcastpodcast.com/classes. See when we're coming to a city near you. We're up in Virginia in January. We're in Boston in March, Missouri in April. Go and check it out, everyone. The tickets should be live by the time you hear this. Can't wait to come and see you. And of course, Growcast Seed Co., growcastpodcast.com/Seed Co. Loving the tectonic truffle. Almost sold out. I'm smoking some right now. God, I love this strain. Shout out to Riser Rich and everything he's doing. Fem Drop coming soon. Stay tuned, everybody. Got some good episodes in the can here. Going to get into some really good cultivation science here in January. And we're going to keep doing these events. We got some new events, some repeat events. I know you guys are excited. You should be. Stay tuned, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
There's bears. There's stuff up there to contend with when you're out in the woods growing weed.